So if this is your first time to Lunch and Learn, this is an hour-long session that generally includes a 15-minute presentation and a 45-minute open discussion. Now, during the open discussion, if you have any questions that you want to ask and they're not about what's being presented, please feel free to ask it. I'm here to help. And for September, our topic is animal intrusion. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss different types of animal intrusion and their levels of risk, how to manage said animal intrusion, and some information on domesticated animals. So there's three main types of animal intrusion that you may find in your field or garden. These can include animal tracks, crop damage, or animal feces. The produce safety rule requires for growers to assess the growing areas for evidence of animal intrusion. So if you see any signs of animal intrusion that show significant amount of contamination, it would be best not to harvest that produce. So the first one is animal tracks. Animal tracks in the growing area have varying risk levels. It's fairly low risk if you see only a single set of tracks in the growing area, but if you notice a high amount of tracks, a lot of trampling around, then some further investigation might need to be done in your growing area to make sure that it is safe to continue on to harvest. The next one is crop damage. So when you're assessing your field, look for bite marks or crushed plants. Few instances of this should indicate moderate risk, but if you see a lot of crop damage in your field, it would show that there's been quite a bit of animals in your area. So it would be best to avoid harvesting in areas if you do notice a high amount of animal-caused crop damage. So here you can see some examples of the crop damage. Up in the right-hand corner, you can see some birds have been picking up the blueberries. At the bottom, you can see the melons have been bit into. Now, the risk is the highest if there's animal feces in the growing area. For areas with widespread evidence of fecal matter, you would want to mark the area and create a no harvest zone. And it is best to avoid harvest in areas with observed animal feces. The point of creating a no harvest zone would to kind of narrow down the area of where they could possibly have, stepped in it and tracked it to. You can see there's little deer droppings by the strawberries in the picture at the bottom. Now, if you have a packing house, smaller animals such as birds or mice sometimes find their way into the packing house. To reduce the likelihood of animal intrusion in a packing house, it's best to keep the doors closed when it's not in use and to utilize pest control devices. And if you happen to notice any signs of animal intrusion within your packing house, make sure to clean and sanitize the area that you see the signs in, and make sure to dispose of any potentially contaminated product or packaging. So there's a few ways that you can manage animal intrusion. I'm not going to be able to go into each and every way, but some of the best ways are to put fences up, use noise deterrents, and if your area allows you to trap them. And you always want to reduce the amount of animal attractants. So remove culls and standing water from the site, whether it's in the field, near your packing house, in the growing house. It's just best to be proactive. Animals are considered a food safety risk, and this is because they can carry human pathogens in their feces, and they can spread this contamination around in fields. To minimize these risks, all farms should identify and address the risk that comes from wild and domestic animals, employ methods to minimize animal entry to growing or processing areas, the uses of fence or noise deterrents, and monitor and document occurrences of animal intrusion. If you notice an area that animals really like to come in from, take note of that and try to find ways to minimize their entry in that area. So I know domesticated animals are a natural part of a farm's environment, but it's still incredibly important to limit their access to growing areas. Some folks like to use working animals. The use of them is not prohibited, but they should not be present in the growing area when there's edible portion of the crops. And if working animals are needed to be used during harvest, it's a pretty good practice to establish a contact minimizing path for them to travel through. And pets, a lot of us have pets, and although dogs and cats can be really great when it comes to, scaring out birds, keeping mice out, they should really be excluded from produce fields or be under strict supervision to make sure that they're not, using the bathroom in the field. And here's some pictures of animals in the field. You can see a cat laying in the dirt under the onions and a dog in a turnip field. So hopefully they're under strict supervision and not just free to their own devices there. So that's the end of my presentation. If anyone has any questions, I would be glad to hear them.